Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, January 24th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside will be mild today with a high of 69.6 degrees and a low of 49.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Coming up, we'll examine North Korea's continued military support to Russia despite significant casualties among their forces. We'll also analyze California's wildfire relief package of $2.5 billion and why experts say this funding might fall short of addressing the full scope of fire damage. Plus, we'll explore scientists' growing concerns about how a giant iceberg breaking away from Antarctica could impact the region's wildlife populations. All this and more, coming up on Alex's News. We begin this morning with concerning developments in the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Our national security correspondent Ethan Thompson has been following reports of North Korea's expanding military presence in Russia. Ethan, what can you tell us?
Grace, according to multiple intelligence sources, North Korea is preparing to deploy additional troops to Russia after suffering significant casualties in their Ukraine operations. NBC News reports that this follows their initial deployment of between 10,000 to 12,000 troops back in October 2023.
What do we know about the casualties they've sustained so far?
Well, Grace, the numbers vary depending on the source. According to South Korea's spy agency, approximately 300 North Korean soldiers have died, with another 2,700 injured. However, Ukrainian President Zelensky provides a much higher estimate, suggesting around 4,000 casualties. U.S. intelligence, as reported by ABC News, places the figure at roughly 1,200.
And I understand there was a significant development just this month regarding captured soldiers?
That's right, Grace. The Independent reports that 2 North Korean soldiers were captured in Russia's Kursk region. This marks the first confirmed instance of North Korean military personnel being detained in this conflict, and they're currently in Ukrainian custody.
How are these North Korean forces performing on the battlefield?
Military analysts indicate that while North Korean soldiers are known for their discipline, they're facing significant challenges. They lack combat experience, and according to multiple sources, they're particularly struggling with Ukraine's flat battlefield terrain, which is quite different from what they're trained for back home.
Beyond troops, what other support is North Korea providing to Russia?
According to Western intelligence sources, North Korea has been actively supplying Russia with artillery and conventional weapons. There's growing concern among Western officials that Russia might reciprocate by transferring advanced weapons technology to North Korea, which could have serious implications for regional stability.
And how is this affecting broader international relations?
The situation is particularly tense, Grace. Kim Jong-un has recently announced what he calls the toughest anti-U.S. policy. The strengthening alliance between North Korea and Russia is raising significant concerns among Western nations about the potential for further destabilization in the region.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Ethan. We'll be sure to keep our viewers updated as this situation develops. We turn now to our second story of the morning, focusing on California's response to the devastating fires that swept through Los Angeles earlier this month. Joining us to discuss this development is our state politics reporter, Chloe Martinez. Chloe, tell us about this significant aid package.
Thank you, Grace. According to multiple sources, including Cal Matters, the California legislature has just approved a massive $2.5 billion bridge funding package to address the aftermath of the Palisades and Eaton fires. This funding, which was unanimously passed by both houses and signed by Governor Newsom, comes from the state's Economic Uncertainty Reserve Fund, which currently holds $8.3 billion.
Can you put these fires into perspective for our viewers? Just how extensive was the damage?
The destruction was unprecedented, Grace. The Santa Barbara Independent reports that together, these fires consumed nearly 40,000 acres, with the Palisades fire burning 23,448 acres and the Eaton fire destroying 14,021 acres. We're looking at approximately 12,000 destroyed structures, 27 confirmed deaths, and damage estimates exceeding $250 billion.
And how exactly will this funding be allocated?
The package is quite comprehensive. According to Newsbreak, beyond the main $2.5 billion, there's $4 million specifically for expediting building permits, $1 million for school district rebuilding, and another $1 million for public building construction. The funds will cover everything from emergency shelter for evacuees to hazardous waste removal and air quality testing.
I understand there's also significant concern about potential mudslides in the burn areas.
That's correct, Grace. Officials are particularly worried about areas in Pacific Palisades, Altadena, and near the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. They're already taking preventive measures, including distributing sandbags, clearing debris, and installing concrete barriers in high-risk areas.
And what about federal assistance? What can residents expect from Washington?
Well, it's a bit complicated. President Biden has pledged to reimburse 100% of state funds spent within the next 180 days. However, former President Trump has publicly threatened to withhold federal aid, creating some uncertainty about long-term federal support.
Thank you, Chloe, for that comprehensive update on California's fire recovery efforts. Here are some other headlines. In tennis news, Novak Djokovic's bid for an 11th Australian Open title came to a dramatic end today as he withdrew from his semifinal match against Alexander Zverev due to a left leg injury. After losing the first set in a tiebreaker, Djokovic walked off the court to a chorus of boos, responding with 2 thumbs up to the crowd. Zverev will now face Jannik Sinner in Sunday's final. A powerful storm is currently battering Ireland and Scotland, with hurricane-force winds exceeding 74 miles per hour. The severe weather has downed power lines and forced the grounding of numerous flights, causing widespread disruption across both countries. Ford Motor Company has announced a major recall, affecting more than 270,000 Bronco and Maverick vehicles. The recall stems from defective 12-volt batteries supplied by Camel Battery of China, which can cause vehicles to stop unexpectedly or fail to start. While no accidents have been reported, Ford will provide software updates to improve battery problem detection. Former President Donald Trump has ordered the release of classified documents related to the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Martin Luther King Jr. The executive order requires a plan for releasing JFK records within 15 days and RFK and MLK records within 45 days, potentially shedding new light on these historic events. In civil rights news, a New York county has agreed to redraw its voting district lines following a lawsuit that claimed the current boundaries disenfranchised residents of color. The agreement aims to ensure more equitable representation for minority communities in local elections. These developments mark significant changes in sports, weather, automotive safety, historical transparency, and voting rights across the nation and beyond. We turn now to a developing situation in Antarctica, where a massive iceberg is on a collision course with South Georgia Island. Our environmental correspondent Ethan Thompson is following this story. Ethan, tell us about this extraordinary ice mass.
Thanks, Grace. What we're tracking here is truly remarkable. According to AP News, we're dealing with what scientists are calling a megaberg, an iceberg known as A23A. That's roughly the size of Rhode Island. To put its scale into perspective, it towers about 130 feet above the water, which is equivalent to a 13-story building.
That's incredible, Ethan. How fast is this giant moving, and what's its history?
The movement is actually quite slow, Grace. AP News reports it's moving at just 1 meter every 3 to 7 seconds. What's fascinating is that this iceberg originally broke away from Antarctica back in 1986. But it's been essentially stuck in sea ice until recently. This movement is part of a larger pattern that's concerning scientists.
What kind of pattern are we talking about?
According to reporting from WSLS, we're seeing unprecedented ice loss in Antarctica. Since 1997, 48 Antarctic ice shelves have lost at least 30% of their mass, and more alarmingly, 28 of those have lost over half their ice. This speaks to the broader climate change impacts we're witnessing in the region.
What are the immediate concerns for South Georgia Island?
The primary worry, Grace, is the impact on wildlife. The island is home to significant populations of penguins and seals. If A23A grounds itself near the island, it could block crucial feeding routes. We've seen this before. In 2004, a smaller iceberg called a 38 caused devastating effects on the local wildlife. with many penguin chicks and seal pups starving when their parents couldn't reach their feeding grounds.
Are scientists optimistic about the ecosystem's ability to cope with this challenge?
There's mixed sentiment. Ted Scambos, speaking to AP News, believes the Southern Ocean ecosystem has shown resilience to such events. However, British Antarctic Survey oceanographer Andrew Meigers points out that these iceberg calvings are becoming more frequent due to human-caused climate change. The island's location in what's known as Iceberg Alley means while these events aren't unprecedented, their increasing frequency is raising red flags about long-term ecological impacts.
And what's the outlook for the coming weeks?
Scientists are currently monitoring two possible scenarios. Either the iceberg will become grounded near the island, or it will slide past. Either way, they'll be studying its effects on local marine ecosystems as it eventually breaks up and melts.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Ethan. We'll be sure to keep our viewers updated on this developing situation. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 3.5, the Perplexity API, and the Google Cloud Text-to-Speech API. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.